just a second, I am going to be doing a phone interview with Jennifer Lamb. And I was so excited to get this book early because it comes out January 2nd, and it's the newest one of her books called The Lost Season of Love and Snow. This is her third book. They are all about Russia and different time periods. This one takes place in the 1830s, and I loved reading about it. It was Nicholas the First makes an appearance. I can't wait to hear who the fictional characters were. I don't even think there were that many. I think most of these characters were real people that she wrote about and that she did all the research for. And I can't wait to pick her brain about this because it is a time period that I don't know much about. So I will be back after the video, but here's Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited today to be speaking with author Jennifer Lamb, and we're going to be talking about her newest book, which will be released on January 2nd, called The Lost Season of Love and Snow. Thank you so much for talking with me today, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, my goodness. I was so excited to get this book because I was actually going to read one of your other books. And then when you started talking,
wrong with that. I know.
And then I was like, oh my gosh, there's actually a book coming out. And then I was like, yes, I want that book. And
great.
This book was amazing. First of all, I am a historical fiction lover. Okay.
Oh,
and
great.
I knew nothing. First of all, the Russian Revolution is like getting big right now in books because of the 100th year anniversary coming up next year.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but this book goes back. So I have my I've read so many books on the Russian Revolution. Like, I feel really well versed in that era, right? And then I was like,
yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is a time period I know nothing about. So I was so excited to see that because that's exactly what I want to do is read more stuff about things, time periods that I don't know anything about,
Right.
So the book is centered around a poet named Alexander Pushkin, who I'd never heard of. And then I read that you really knew him. You really knew his stuff.
Well, I would say that I got to know him. So I was a Russian studies minor when I was in getting my bachelor's degree. So I had some familiarity with him, but he's not as well known to English language audiences. And some scholars think that's because his poetry is and the way he uses language is so it's so intertwined with Russian that it's difficult to give a strong English language translation of his work. There's a musicality to his work in Russian that we can't quite capture in English. But having said that, he is I have to give him a little bit of background for those that aren't familiar with his work. There's a very famous statue in St. Petersburg called the Bronze Horseman. That's the name for that. The statue was built before Alexander Pushkin's poem of that name, but the name became associated with the statue because of his poem that he wrote to kind of capture. It's quite complicated, so I don't want to say it's a poem about the statue. There's a lot more to it than that. But that was one of the things that kind of captured my imagination in terms of Pushkin's work. I was also familiar with his serialized novel in verse, which in English we call Eugene Onegin. And I use a Russian version of Eugene and call it Evgeny Onegin in the book. That was actually a movie in the 90s with Ray Fiennes and Liv Tyler, so I had some familiarity with that one.
Right, why does it sound so familiar? That's why.
Yeah, and that's so there is a little there. I think that's one of his works that is more familiar to English language readers. And I also, this was something that I think I knew in the back of my head, but I didn't remember actively until I dove into the research for this book. One of my favorite movies of all time is Amadeus, and that is based on the play Amadeus, but the play is based on Pushkin's work, Mozart and Salieri. So I had to work that into the book a little bit too. So those are the works by Pushkin that were most meaningful to me. But he's wonderful. I would encourage anyone to read his work.
Well, I thought what was really fascinating because I just started reading it, okay? I didn't look him up or anything. I mean, I read, a little bit about what it was about, but I just wanted to start reading it, because that's kind of how I do it. And then I go back and look at it, but I wanted to get to know him through your eyes first.
Oh,
okay?
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially, okay, so the book is through Natalia, right?
Correct.
That's how you say that. Okay, Natalia, which
Yes.
he calls
Yeah.
her Natalie. But
yes.
yeah, it's like through her eyes. And then I understood when I went back and did my research, I was like, oh, now I know why you did it. Like, I loved it because it's like you read one thing when you do research on her in Wiki and, Wikipedia, it's this one,
Yeah.
and it's, of course, 3 paragraphs, doesn't give her any justice, but kind of makes her seem like something other, like you judge her right away, and
Yeah.
then after reading your book, I was like, no, you don't understand.
And that makes me so happy because that is exactly the kind of feedback that I'm looking for with this book. And in terms of Natalia's story, what I had, again, having some familiarity with Pushkin and his life and not giving anything away because the novel actually opens with this, as you know, but he dies in a duel that is fought over her honor. And that was really all I knew about her for many years. And it was always just in the back of my head that, I wonder what's going on there. I wonder what happened. And I found her again, for lack of a better word, when I was reading a wonderful novel, and what I'm about to say is not a criticism. It's a novel by Martin Cruz Smith, who wrote Gorky Park and is amazing. He had a recent novel called Tatiana, where there are references to a yacht that's named the Natalia Goncharova. And some of the characters will talk about this yacht, and they end up talking about her because she's, again, much more familiar to Russians as Pushkin's wife. But the characters, and it's very true to life. Again, it's not a criticism of the book. The characters talk about Natalia in very negative terms and kind of assume that she was cheating on Pushkin, that perhaps she was the Tsar's mistress, and that it was, to my mind, it was like this old story that I personally don't really care for, that if a great man is taken down by a beautiful woman. And whenever I hear some version of that story, I always feel like there's got to be more to it than that. So the version of Natalia and of Alexander and of all the historical characters in the novel, I 100% readily admit these are fictionalized versions of these characters. There's a lot of my imagination that comes into their creation. And that's, of course, one of the joys of writing historical fiction as opposed to straight biographies.
Right.
But having said that, there has been more current research on Natalia that shows that she seems to have had a much greater intellectual curiosity than we had previously thought, or at least that anyone had previously known or bothered to find. And I just feel that even though this is a very specific story in a very specific time and place, I feel it's very important as historical novelists, and I would even argue historians in general, it's very important to recover and recapture the lives of women, because otherwise I think first of all, women's stories kind of get lost in the shuffle. And also it's all too easy to kind of portray women using gendered stereotypes. And I hope that historical novelists in recovering women's stories can help combat that, if that makes sense.
Well, and isn't it interesting that it's coming out? I mean, when you were writing this, you had no idea of what current day event news was going to be.
Correct.
Like,
it was pre Weinstein,
right.
For sure. Weinstein. I'm sorry, I think I mispronounced that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it
it's
was
crazy.
definitely pre that.
Yeah, but it's crazy because it was like all of a sudden, and I'm assuming, I know that it's fictionalized, but there is truth. I mean, you do your research, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of just assumed that she flirted and that
Right.
she, especially with Nicholas the First. And I think it was
Yeah.
even mentioned, one of the articles, I don't know if it was in Wiki or just one of the articles that I was reading, that, they were assuming that it was her that was was like, she was this like flirtatious woman,
Exactly.
and it's like, really? That's how, that's how she's going to be portrayed. And
Exactly.
I did see that there were all these letters, of his, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did you read those?
I've read the English translations of
Right.
his letters. I haven't, unfortunately, I lost my fluent, I was never fluent in Russian, but there was a point when I could read it pretty, I could kind of stumble my way through it. Kind of lost that, so I wasn't able to read originals. But the translations I felt were very, it indicated that they had a really nice rapport, that there was banter between them. It seemed to me like a loving, fun relationship between Natalia and Alexander.
Right.
In terms of her flirting with other people, I mean, that was my interpretation as well when I started kind of digging into the research and seeing how Natalia had been portrayed in past historical records and books. And to my mind, it especially when they were talking about her relationship with the Tsar, to my mind, if you live in mid-19th century Russia, if the Tsar flirts with you, I can't imagine a situation where you don't feel like you need to flirt back. And
right.
Even though this was written before this onslaught of sexual harassment cases kind of came to be big news in the media, I think all of us, women, but of course men too in some circumstances, maybe more than we know, I think we all at some point in our lives have either experienced this or been close to someone who has experienced this. And it's almost, for me anyway, it almost felt intuitive that, of course, she was in an uncomfortable situation with a strong power imbalance. I just can't imagine how she would be expected to react in any other way. So I hope, it sounds like, and I hope that comes through in the novel, and that there is some resonance with modern readers. That yes, this was this was something that's been going on for a long time.
Well, and like I said, I didn't know anything about this time period, and I really know very little about Nicholas the First because that just wasn't a time period that I read a lot on. But I really enjoyed how you brought him in and made them all. It was very readable. It wasn't above me. It was like, I really felt like I could be there. I understood it, and the description of what they had to go through, like, all these balls and, dances and, I love to think about that. Like, I'm like, what is that like? Like, I love that. And I was so happy that you made it such a huge part of this book because, when you're talking about getting a dress to go to a ball, and I'm like, I want to go to a ball. I want to buy that.
Well, I definitely had that reaction when I was doing research as well, and thank you very much for that because everyone has their own personal style. For me, I feel that my strength and what I enjoy is making history accessible. So I do tend to be drawn to time periods and even sometimes to individuals that are not as, again, in the English language world, maybe not as well known. And I want to have some entry into that world for readers. And I do think that for all of the dangers that were inherent in that world, it strikes me as so glamorous and so exciting. And this was also important to me when I was thinking about how Natalia has been portrayed. because, again, diving into the research, especially reading books that were written, I would say, more toward the first half of the 20th century. Of course, they were primarily biographies of Pushkin, and she is kind of a secondary character in that. And she is, in some cases, flat out portrayed as frivolous, just only cared about her dresses, didn't think about the money, didn't think about the toll that all of this was taking on her husband. But again, I couldn't help but think, if you're thrust into this position, and she was very young when they met and when they married.
Right. I saw
she
that. I
was
was
16
like,
when they met.
Yeah, he was like 12 years older?
Yeah,
like 12 years older than him? Right. So
if I remember, he was about 30. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so it's like, that's another thing. So you're just, you go from living with your parents to right into this world. And,
exactly.
you know what? I love how you portrayed her. I love, like, first of all, if he wouldn't, I don't know, if it was so bad on one-sided, why would he be willing to duel the guy? Okay.
Exactly.
That's how I look at it,
I feel very strongly that they were, again, this is emotional history. No one can read their minds. We're just going with what we have. But based on what I read, and again, definitely throwing in my own intuition, my own imagination, but I strongly believe that they were in love. I do believe that both of them, and I don't go too much into this in the book, but of course, I shouldn't say of course, there's ample evidence that Pushkin may have cheated on her. And the reason that I didn't go into that, he had many love affairs before they married, and there's reason to believe that some of those may have continued, or there may have been new ones after. And the reason that I didn't go into this is that this is one where I felt like readers would respond as we would be prone to in the modern day, that oh, how horrible. And I felt like, even though I hate it, there was a double standard back then, and it probably would have just been expected that your husband would have these, and I would say, unfortunately, if that was in reverse, it wasn't necessarily treated the same way. If the woman was having affairs, it wasn't treated the same as if the man was having affairs. So I didn't delve into that too much, but I do feel that they were in love, but likely both of them were drawn out of the marriage to some extent. They were attractive, they were charming. They're in a situation, they're constantly in social situations where they're meeting other charming, attractive people. I just, like, I'm romantic, but I'm also realistic, and I just can't imagine that there weren't at least some thoughts about other people. But at the end of the day, I believe they were truly in love. And I should also note that Pushkin himself did not blame Natalia for what happened. He was very clear to her that this was his decision. He felt strongly that he needed to go into this duel, but he did not blame her in any way.
Yeah, I love that, and I don't want to give spoilers for, anybody, because when we start talking, it's history, but there's still story, and I want everybody to experience it the way I did. But I thought that what you did beautifully was that there were gaps in their marriage because of him going here and there. And I think that we have to, as much as we don't want to, you have to assume, especially, there's no texting, there's barely letters, okay? And they're coming weeks and weeks apart. At some, you're not living that long, okay?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You're like, I don't know when he's going to be back or if he's going to be back.
Yes, and I'm sure she was lonely, and I'm sure she thought about other people. and kind of going back to her age, it was interesting to me to try to think about how she would react to this social life that kind of came as part of her marriage to this famous poet, who depended on the Tsar for essentially for and I was going to say essentially for income, because the Tsar could censor his books, and that would, of course, impact his ability to make income, along with all the politics that would go along with publishers wanting to pay if the Tsar was not happy with him. I think, based on my research and, again, on my intuition, I think that she held to be part of that world and drawn to it. I can't imagine being late teen, early 20s, and having the opportunity to go to glamorous costume and masquerade balls several times a week and having all the energy of youth and all that great stuff. I can't imagine not wanting to be a part of that. So when people talk about kind of her, when they speak about her in negative terms, and part of that is her frivolity, I think, well, maybe to some extent, but who could blame her? It just seems so exciting.
Right, exactly. It's, it was a beautiful book. It was so much fun to read.
Thank you.
Thank you. Like I said, I love historical fiction, but I love this story, and I'm so happy that I knew nothing about it. I really am.
Okay.
I'm so happy that I got to learn about it through you. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are going to know who he is, and they're going to already, but I'm happy I didn't. I mean, just for, because I'm used to reading about so many things that I do know in history, and I like learning about the new stuff. And I love that you gave these characters that, probably not a lot of people have heard of, and you're giving them a voice and a story and taking us back to that time. I really enjoyed that. So, but I do want to talk about your other books, because this is your third book, and all of these books are set in Russia. And the one that had caught my eye was The Secret Daughter of the Tsar, which was your first one in 2013.
That's right.
And I was like, oh, what an interesting concept right there, especially because I've been reading so many stories about the Romanovs. I was like, oh, that is a different take. I like that,
Oh, awesome. Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that. So yes, that was my first book, and thank you for mentioning it. So that one I don't want to, I'm trying not to tread into spoiler territory either. But that one, I actually, it was interesting. I have three stories essentially in that one. So one is set in right around the turn 19th, 20th century Russia. So pre-revolution, but not too pre-revolution. Focuses on characters that are associated with the last Romanov, the royal family. And then I have another story that's in Nazi-occupied Paris in World War II, and a present-day story. And by the end of the book, hopefully, I've had good feedback on this, so I feel confident saying this. You see how they all tie together, and I would say if someone is fascinated by the Anastasia story, that this would be a good book for them. But having said that, it's not specifically an Anastasia story. I talk about it in the author's notes, and again, I don't want to get spoilery, so I'm not going to say too much more. And the author's notes are definitely at the end. But it was inspired by something I had run into when I was going through a period where I just could not read enough about Anastasia. Read everything I could find.
I understand that, because I'd gone through that stage myself. That's how I stumbled upon it. And then, and then you had a book, The Tsarina's Legacy, and then that was in 2016. So that was at the beginning, or I'm not sure exactly when in 2016. I wanted to look at that.
Yeah, that's correct. That was April 2016. And So that I am calling it a companion novel to The Secret Daughter of the Tsar. So if you're interested in reading both, I would recommend reading Secret Daughter of the Tsar first, because there are some characters that their story continues in the second book. Having said that, I tried to write it so it could be a standalone as well. So some of the characters are a continuation from the first book, but I also have that one. I guess I keep going down each book. So I started with three stories that all come together. Then in the second book, 2 stories that come together, and then in my most recent book, I just wanted to focus on one story this time around.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, they're pretty close together. I mean, you're writing these, in-depth research books, like really close together. So I was really impressed by that.
Thank you. And the Tsarina's legacy, it did influence the most recent one in one way. The historical story in that book is set during the time of Catherine the Great. And Catherine is a character. She's not the main character, but she is a significant character in the book. And I was very happy when I started researching Pushkin's world and Natalia's family that there was a small, but I thought very intriguing connection between Natalia's family and Catherine the Great. So that works its way into the most recent book. But I like I enjoy reading anything I can get my hands on Anastasia. I feel the same way about Catherine. She's fascinating, and I would encourage anyone to read a really good biography of her. Robert Massey has an incredible biography of Catherine that came out a few years ago, and it was very helpful in my writing.
Oh, so what are you working on next?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't have a really great answer for it, but I have a couple of projects that I've been I'm going to say playing with at this point. I am I don't want to say sworn to secrecy. That sounds over dramatic, but at this time, at this early stage, I'm not publicly talking about them right now. But I do hope that and anticipate that it will be there will be at least a Russian element. And I will also just add as a teaser that I don't know how things are going to play out, but I had read everything about Anastasia. I had read everything about Catherine the Great. And I am a huge fan of The Americans on FX, which, for those that don't know it, it's Soviet spies in America in the early 1980s. And that kind of revived my interest in Cold War stories. So
interesting.
Yeah. So at this point, that's kind of all I can talk about. But I look forward to 2018 being like getting. I'm really in promotion right now for my new book here at the end of 2017. So much as I love doing all this, I'm also really looking forward to 2018 being like the writing year and getting another book out in the world, hopefully in a couple of years.
Oh, I can't wait. You just keep writing.
Thank you. Oh, that's great feedback.
Yeah, and I just want to let everybody know again, I mean, this book comes out January 2nd. You can already pre-order it on Amazon.
Yeah.
I think you can even pre-order the audio, as I remember correctly when I looked.
I will double check. I'm pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure.
I'm excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I almost ordered it, and then I was like, "Oops!" Like it's not to come. I'll be talking to you first. So, because a lot of times I like to hear them just to hear, because I like to experience them lots of different ways. But anyway, yes, I'm pretty sure that you can pre-order all of them, and we will have those links listed under here. And it was just so nice to get to talk to you about this, and I want to thank you again for taking me into that world, because it was so much fun.
Thank
so
you.
Much fun.
I am. That's exactly the feedback I like to hear, and that's my goal. Like I think books are meant to be fun and draw you in and keep you reading. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So well, you have a great evening, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Hi guys, wasn't Jennifer amazing? And I'm recording this really late, so barely any makeup left. It was an audio, but I did stick a little lip gloss on because it's really late and I can tell how tired I am. But anyway, I am so happy that I got to talk to her. She is on the West Coast, so it was a little bit of a time difference for me. But anyway, if you love historical fiction, if you love historical fiction set in Russia, I mean, get her book. It was amazing. I'm going to have all the links below. And as you can see, she's a great storyteller and she knows her stuff. So if you enjoyed it, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.